So I was asked to come and talk to you about something I've spoken to Phyllis's groups and conferences and Eagle meetings over and over again over the past decade, and that is, of course, immigration. And I've entitled my remarks "Immigration 2019: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly." Yeah, I'm a Clint Eastwood Western fan. So the reason is because there are some good things that have happened. There are some bad things that have happened, and there are some ugly things that are happening in immigration. And I want to give you a quick summary of what's going on and what I think is the most important right now. As Steve mentioned, he and I have been working together with We Build the Wall, which, by the way, in June completed the first ever privately constructed border wall in United States history. First ever. For those of you who don't know, I served in the Ashcroft Justice Department as counsel to John Ashcroft. I co-authored Arizona's immigration law of 2010 and a bunch of other states' laws, including some of the Missouri legislation that was passed in 2008. I represented the 10 ICE agents who sued the Obama administration in court over the DACA amnesty, and on and on. But I'm also now a candidate for the United States Senate because I've decided, thank you. I think the president needs someone who will lead the charge for him on the immigration issue and on restoring the Constitution in the United States Senate. And right now, it's just not happening. The Senate seems to be in neutral, and the president needs the Senate moving ahead at full speed. And how unhinged have the Democrats become on the immigration issue? If you'd asked any of us 4 years ago, would the Democrats be calling for the abolition of ICE? Would you have predicted that? No, that just seems way off the edge. But they want to tear down the wall, not only not build it, they want to tear it down. They want to abolish ICE. They want to do everything possible to allow illegal immigration to continue. And it is essential that we win this battle. We have to win this battle because we're protecting American workers. We're protecting our fellow citizens against violence that is often perpetrated by illegal aliens. And when President Trump in that speech said that there are many illegal aliens who commit murder and rape, he is correct. There are many who do. And there is a huge amount of crime committed by illegal aliens that is completely preventable because the person should not have been in the United States in the first place. So let me go through my list. The good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's start with the good. What has happened that is good in the last year or two in immigration? I put two things in the good category: the travel ban and the Supreme Court rulings. Let's talk about both. The travel ban, now you may remember this. This was right in the first weeks of the Trump administration. The media panned it, said it was rolled out in a bumpy fashion, and yes, it was. It could have been rolled out more smoothly, but who cares? The important part is what was in it. What was in that travel ban was a 120-day halt on refugees, a blocking of entry from people from high-risk terrorist-related countries, and new extreme vetting of all refugee applicants. I write a regular column for Breitbart, and right when that debate started, I wrote a piece which many people didn't realize, but did you know that since the first World Trade Center bombing of 1993, there have been at least 30 terrorists who came in through the refugee system? 30 terrorists. And going through the refugee system, you have lots of interviews with American officials to get your status, your asylum or your refugee status. But they bamboozled every one of them, and they exploit the refugee system, and then they would use that green card that refugee status gives you to go back to the home country and get terrorist training. And so this was a big problem. The Trump travel ban immediately changed that picture, and it also changed what was happening in the lead up to that. Remember the last year of the Obama administration? I know it's hard. Most of us have tried to excise these memories from our brains. But if you remember, in that last year of the Obama administration was ramping up refugee admissions from the two most dangerous countries in the world, Somalia and Syria. In 2008, a disproportionate number of refugees were admitted by the Obama administration, 9,012 from Somalia and 12,486 from Syria. And get this, they were giving them, almost all of them, a wide open door. The Obama administration only denied 7% of applications from Syrians. 93% coming in. Yeah, you say you're a young man, age 25, and you have no relatives that you can account for, and your history is a complete blank, but you say that you fear for your life in your home country? Yeah, come on in. They were not denying the many, many bogus claims of refugees. Anyway, President Trump, thank God, had the courage and the conviction to put in place the travel ban and institute much higher standards of screening. And I believe that that has saved lives in America. I believe that had he not done that, had Hillary become our president, God forbid, that would have continued. The influx of people from Somalia and Syria, many of whom are not terrorists, but many of whom were, that would have continued, and we would have been in a much more dangerous situation. So thank God President Trump had the courage to do that. That brings me to the second item in the good category, the Supreme Court's decision. Because the Supreme Court has had 4 major decisions in recent years upholding our immigration authority, and that is important. First of all, the court upheld in a divided court, upheld the travel ban, which is ridiculous. It should have been 9-0. 8 U.S.C. 1182F is a well-known part of the U.S. law for immigration lawyers. It says that the president, whenever he deems it necessary for the good of the United States, can suspend the entry of any immigrant or any alien or any class of aliens coming into the United States. He has absolute authority to shut the border down, to close off the gates to certain people that might threaten us. The president used that authority. It should have been so obvious, but of course we don't have a Supreme Court that sees the obvious, at least 4 of the justices don't, and so it was a divided decision. Should have been unanimous. Another big decision, this was right before Trump took office, but it was very important. A divided Supreme Court agreed with the Fifth Circuit that the DAPA amnesty, which is the second of those two, the DACA and the DAPA amnesty was illegal. It was a divided court, but it allowed the Fifth Circuit's ruling to stand, and that means also that the DACA amnesty is illegal. The court just recently this year allowed the Department of Defense to continue to use those dollars under the National Emergency Declaration to build the wall. What better use of defense dollars than to build a wall defending your country? Last time I checked, let's see, about the time that the whole concept of walls were developed, it was to protect cities, countries, Great Wall of China. Walls are one of the most rudimentary yet effective ways that we protect ourselves, whether it's a base, whether it's a country, whether it's a city, whether it's a fortification. Walls are what we need. And thank goodness we are now using those dollars, and the Supreme Court approved that. And then just this week, the Supreme Court also allowed the president's asylum adjustment policy, which basically means that if you walk through 2 or 3 safe countries before you come to the United States to declare asylum, you probably weren't walking through just to get away from violence, because you could have declared asylum claimed asylum in the first country. The Supreme Court is letting that stand as well. And there are 2 reasons the Supreme Court is letting those things stand. Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. Thank God President Trump put them in place. Okay, I'm watching the time because I do have to catch a plane, but we've got more to talk about the bad and the ugly. Okay, so that was the happy part of the speech. Now we're going to talk about where there's a lot of work to do. The bad. 3 items in the bad basket: the illegal immigration numbers, the wall, and the census. First, the illegal immigration numbers. As you may have heard, I mean, you probably know this, there's been an unmitigated crisis for the past 12 months, almost exactly 12 months, when the caravans started coming in about a year ago, the massive surge of asylum applicants about a year ago, and the massive surge of people using children as immigration shields, people falsely claiming that a child they purchased or rented, and I do mean purchased or rented, is their own, and that this allows them to then be released, at least under the former rules, released after 20 days into the landscape of the United States, never to be seen again. Anyway, the crisis has been going for 12 months. Things got an incredibly high level starting in March. March, for the first time in 12 years, the immigration numbers went to 100,000 people apprehended in a single month. That was the highest number in 12 years. But then it continued. In April, another 100,000 plus month. In May, another 100,000 plus month. June, another 100,000 plus. July, again, in August, July it was 140,000 illegal aliens. And then in August, we finally had a respite, and the number was down to about 64,000. That's good, but it still falls in the bad category, because guess what? During the Obama years, the average was closer to 20 or 30,000 a month. So our numbers have improved, but we are still in the bad category. It's way above normal. The main reason we saw any improvement at all is that the Mexican military actually has started helping us, believe it or not. And the reason they've started helping us is because President Trump threatened them with tariffs. It works. The president's tactics of using threats, playing hardball, are working. Now, by the way, I should have said something earlier. I hope nobody here minds me using the term illegal alien. Does that offend anyone? No, okay, good, good. Because, it is the legally correct term. You will find illegal alien throughout federal law. One term you will not find in federal law is the term undocumented immigrant. The reason you won't find it is because immigrant means green card holder in federal law. So there's no such thing as an undocumented holder of a green card. Calling an illegal alien an undocumented immigrant is like calling a thief an undocumented owner. There is no document. All right, second item in the bad basket, the wall. I put this in the bad category because we are so far behind where we need to be. And I'll talk a little bit about what Steve mentioned, and that is we build the wall in our efforts. But let me just give you some perspective here. Now, the blame lies chiefly with congressional Democrats, to be sure. They are the ones who have been refusing to provide funding for the wall. But some of the blame lies with Republican leadership in both the House and the Senate, who should have made this the number one item on the legislative agenda starting in January 2017. This should have been the top priority, but it wasn't. And so fault does also lie with Republicans. We could have acted when we had the majority in both houses. Now, let me share with you some perspective in terms of miles. The southern border is approximately 1,933 miles. So let's just round it and call it 1,900 miles, the southern border. Only about 100 miles of that 1,900 actually has a barrier that will stop pedestrians. When you hear some CNN, I know you don't watch CNN, when you hear some talking head saying on the TV, well, actually, we have 600 miles of barrier on the wall, on the border, what they're saying is, yeah, there's 600 miles of something, but only 100 of it can stop a pedestrian. The rest of it is often so-called vehicle barriers, which are basically Normandy barriers. It's a beam horizontally suspended about 3 feet off the ground by a couple of X beams like this, and it's just there to stop a vehicle, but you can just step right over it or crouch down and walk right under it. They call that having a barrier. But if you're talking about real walls, we only have about 100 miles out of 1,900 miles. Okay, well, that's good. President Trump has changed things, right? Well, yes and no. We're moving in the right direction, but the wall that's been constructed while President Trump has been in office has been almost all replacing existing pedestrian barrier. So we haven't gained much from that 100-mile figure. But the good news is we do have wall that is on the table, and some of it's actually getting started right now. President Trump got 55 miles of wall for the Rio Grande Valley sector. That's near McAllen, Texas. And he also got 218 miles through the emergency declaration, and almost all of that is in Arizona, New Mexico, and California. So add those together, that's an extra 273 miles to the existing 100 miles. At the end of 2020, God willing, we will have close to 400 miles of actual pedestrian wall. Amen. And that is awesome. But we have to remember that there's still 1,500 miles of the border that's wide open. And the vast majority of that is in Texas, by the way. That's where I believe we have to recognize the federal government is the number one player in building the wall, but we've got to have everybody, all hands on deck. We've got to have state governments stepping up. I'm not waiting for California to do anything, but state governments like Texas and Arizona step up. We need private organizations like We Build the Wall. It's extraordinary what we were able to do. The organization raised $25 million. It's growing, and we decided, okay, where will we go? We don't have the money to build 50 or 100 miles in the desert, but we can build 2 miles here, 3 miles there, a half a mile here. And so we built this first section over Memorial Day weekend. And one of the things you may wonder is, if you were watching it, it was the timing of it. We actually started our crews at 5 o'clock on a Friday of a holiday weekend. And we had the crews work 24/7 overnight, so that when the people of El Paso went to work on Tuesday morning on Interstate 10, they would look and see this giant wall that had been built while they were drinking beer and having a nice weekend. And we did that because we didn't want to alert the protesters, Antifa, all of these organizations, that if they had known we were going to build a wall in that place, they would be on the ground in front of the dozers. They would be protesting. They'd be holding marches. They'd be putting pressure on the property owner, trying to intimidate him not to allow us to build. And so that's why we came in. We did it through surprise, that you could call it that, but we did it because we didn't want to give the other side a chance to try to stop us. We're going to do the same thing with Section 2. It'll be coming up soon to a border area near you, or maybe not near you. But I'm not going to tell you where it is, because that's not how we do it. We're just going to build it, and you'll hear about it on the news when the next one goes in. And I'm going to continue working in this cause until, God willing, I win that U.S. Senate race. But that's we have to keep doing this, and we have to also recognize that the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives, they have got to get serious about this. They act like, well, the Democrats don't want the wall, what can we do? I'll tell you what we can do. We can attach wall funding to every single piece of legislation the Democrats hold dear. Every single piece. And I think we probably, you tell me if I'm wrong on this, I just think that maybe we shouldn't give a single dollar in foreign aid until we finish building our own wall around our own country. Israel and a couple of allies accepted. But all the other stuff. Okay, now number 3 in the bad category. Number 3. It would be really bad if I missed my plane, but we're on target. The census. As you may have read, this has been reported a lot if you've been following the whole citizenship question on the census, but I urged President Trump in the very early days of the administration to restore the citizenship question to the United States Census. Believe it or not, the U.S. Census does not ask you, are you a U.S. citizen? The census of virtually every country on the planet asks, are you a U.S. citizen? But not ours. We stopped asking it in 1950 on the short form and moved it to the long form. Then, after the long form was terminated, after the 2000 census, the Census Bureau got rid of it entirely, quietly. Now, aside from the obvious fact that every sovereign nation ought to know how many citizens it has, there are many important reasons to know how many citizens you have beyond that. And one of the most important is that the principle of one person, one vote is at stake. Think of it this way. Each of us lives in a House of Representatives district for the U.S. Congress, right? And the average size of a House of Representatives district is 760,000. Let's just call it 700,000. If you live in a district with 700,000 people, say here in the St. Louis area, and virtually all of the people in your district are U.S. citizens, there are no illegal aliens, then you all have that 1/700,000th of a vote. But if you lived in a district in California where 350,000 of the people in your district are illegal aliens, the people and 350,000 are citizens, the citizens in that California district have twice as much voting power as you do. They have half the number of voters in the district. And so the principle of one person, one vote is violated if you give the same voting power to districts with different numbers of illegal aliens. That's one of the main reasons that we had to move the citizenship question back onto the census. But of course, the ACLU and the liberal attorneys on the open borders side, they immediately sued, and they brought multiple lawsuits, and they said, well, this is going to cause an undercount. People will be afraid to answer the census question. Why would they be afraid to answer the census question? The census says nothing on this form can be used against you. There's no reason they would be afraid. And by the way, they were asking that on that question on the long form for 50 years, and nobody claimed that people were afraid to answer it. It is an amazing situation, and unfortunately, as you probably heard, in June of 2019, the case went to the Supreme Court. The case was accelerated very quickly, and Justice Roberts issued his worst mistake since the Obamacare decision. Justice Roberts let us down, and Justice Roberts sided with the 4 liberals on the Supreme Court and said that even though it is legal, it is no violation of law to ask, are you a citizen on the U.S. Census? Duh. Even though it's no violation of law, the administration has not, to my satisfaction, explained its reasoning under the Administrative Procedures Act. Therefore, they've got to give us a new explanation. Therefore, we send it back to the district court. That's what the liberals wanted. But they knew that it was too late in the day. The census forms had to be printed. It was going to be very difficult to go through the lower court again in time for the 2020 census. And then we were betrayed by a second set of conservatives, or that was only one conservative, Justice Roberts. The others were some of the lawyers in the Trump White House. They put up the white flag. Instead of continuing the fight and pressing the district court to go ahead, give the explanation of the administration and get that question on the census, they said, oh, we're not going to do it. So the fight was given up, and that is truly in the bad category. So we will not see the U.S., are you a U.S. citizen, on the U.S. Census, and it is a travesty. It is an outrage that we are not allowed to do that. I think it would be nice if the United States Senate passed a law requiring that question on the census. I don't know. I know a senator who's going to propose that bill if I get there. Okay, and now the ugly. The category of the ugly. In this category, I'm going to go very quickly, But I have three things that are truly ugly that are happening in immigration right now, despite the fact that we have the best president on illegal immigration this country has ever had. Number one, the three items are welfare for illegal aliens, sanctuary cities, and aliens voting. Welfare for illegal aliens. It's already costing us $100 billion a year net, after you take into account any taxes that the illegal aliens are providing. We are spending government benefits and services exceeding $100 billion a year, mostly at the state and local level, for illegal aliens. And it's continuing with, unfortunately, even with Trump in office, for two reasons. Many of it's coming from the states, like blue states like California, Illinois, et cetera. And it's also in part continuing because of the deep state within the federal bureaucracy that's not changing practices. Let me just give you some examples that are just astonishing. We are giving migrants employment authorization right away. So in this wave that's happening, ICE has been operating under an old Obama administration policy that started in 2010 of giving something called immigration parole to someone who passes their credible fear screening. So when you come in for asylum, you say, I want asylum. You say, I have a credible fear. That's your initial credible fear of being persecuted. I won't get into the weeds. And you pass that initial screening, and then you wait for your actual asylum hearing, which used to be 6 months down the road. Now it's 6 years down the road because of the flooding of the system. Well, what the Obama administration started doing, and which unfortunately the Trump administration is still doing, is giving immigration parole to that person in the interim, which means he can get a work permit, which means that all he has to do is come in illegally, say the magic words associated with asylum, and he's got a work permit. Now, back in his home country, people are waiting years, hiring lawyers, paying fees, and trying to do it the right way to get a work permit. This guy who came in illegally is getting a work permit that he is not entitled to have. Second thing that's happening, and this appears to be a problem with the deep state, it seems that they're getting food stamps as well. One Border Patrol agent told me when I was down in, I won't say what sector, when I was down on the border, she said recently at one of the processing places where all these hundreds and hundreds of illegal aliens were being held before the Border Patrol decided what to do with them, a lady came up to her and said, where do I get my form to get the free food card? Where do I get my form so I can have the free food card? In other words, she had heard from other illegal aliens that you can get food stamps, you just have to fill out a form. And so they are coming in fully expecting and realizing that once they have parole, they can also get access to food stamps. Now, technically under the law, they're not supposed to get food stamps, but apparently, in the reality, they are getting food stamps. So we are continuing to hand out free goodies, and as long as we continue to hand out free stuff, we are going to be in a perilous situation on the border because that will be a magnet drawing people in. You know, John Ashcroft, my mentor, once said America used to be about freedom. Now, unfortunately, it's about free stuff. And with illegal immigration, it seems the same way. People used to come in for freedom, but all too often, and they still do, but all too often in this current wave, many are coming in for free stuff. So let me go to the next one here. Sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities, of course, are something that President Trump has railed against and has spoken against many, many times, and he has stood up for the victims of illegal aliens. But unfortunately, the number of sanctuary cities, counties, and states has continued to grow. We are now well over 300 sanctuary jurisdictions in the United States. These are jurisdictions that do not cooperate with the police with ICE. When the police have someone they've arrested, and ICE says, yeah, we want that guy. He's an illegal alien gang member. He's got a criminal rap sheet as long as your arm. We would like to take custody. And these jurisdictions say, nope, not going to help you, ICE. We are a sanctuary city. We are a friendly, welcoming city. Well, that friendly, welcoming city is endangering its own residents because the ICE only picks up the phone when the illegal alien is a dangerous individual. They don't pick up the phone and call about somebody who's just working at the local restaurant. They only pick up the phone when that person is a dangerous criminal. And when those cities say, no, we're going to turn that person loose on our streets, they put their own citizens in danger, just as Katie Steinley's family or the Bologna family from a few years ago in San Francisco. So on and on and on, the list goes on of families who've lost loved ones. Did you know, however, that Congress made sanctuary cities illegal? Yeah, they did. In 1996. It's been illegal this whole time. But in 1996, Congress actually thought that Democrat-controlled cities and Democrat-controlled states would obey the law. So if there's a federal law saying you can't be a sanctuary city, they wouldn't do it. That's not where we are now. It's lawless. And indeed, it's almost an embrace of lawlessness on the left. And so if I were writing the law, if I have the opportunity to write the law, I think any sanctuary city or sanctuary state in this country should not get a single penny of federal dollars until they change. Okay, and last but not least, and I'm still going to make my plane, and that is aliens voting. As you know, many of you may know, I guess, I was the co-chair or vice chair of the Presidential Commission on Election Integrity. Vice President Pence was the chair. If you Google this, you will find how well controlled Google is by the purveyors of fake news. If you Google it, you'll be confronted with all kinds of headlines. Kobach Commission fails to find any fraudulent votes, and the commission is shut down. Commission closed down because of failure to find any illegal voting. That's not what happened at all. In fact, the commission had the first 2 meetings, and we started producing literally thousands of cases of votes cast by people illegally. Indeed, our first meeting, we presented 2,000 convictions, not suspicions, convictions of people who had been convicted for voter fraud since 2001. And then the second meeting, we talked about over 20,000 cases of double voting in just a few states. So we were producing all this information, and the left was getting nervous, and they sued. But it wasn't one lawsuit, it was 13 lawsuits against the commission, filed mostly by the ACLU, more than any presidential commission has ever encountered in our nation's history. Lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, because they didn't want the commission to keep going. And they ultimately succeeded. Because of all those lawsuits, all of the commission staff was spending its time answering interrogatories, dealing with the lawyers, dealing with requests for evidence, and they couldn't get the commission's job done. The vice president's office ultimately made the decision to pull the plug on it. I think that was the wrong decision. I think we should have just kept on going. But this is the perfect example of how the left uses legal warfare, or as it's sometimes called, lawfare. If they can't get their way through the legislative process, they go to the courts and they engage in lawfare. And that's what they did against the Presidential Commission. And it is a shame that they shut the commission down, because we were on the verge of going to the biggest area, or one of the biggest. I would say the number one form of voter fraud that we see in this country is double voting, people voting in 2 jurisdictions. The number 2 form of illegal, and I used to be Secretary of State of Kansas, by the way, so I did this for a while. The number 2 form of illegal alien voting is voting by non-citizens, both legal and illegal. Number 2 form of illegal voting is voting by non-citizens, both illegal and legal, and neither one is entitled to vote. In Kansas, we wrote a law that requires proof of citizenship at the time you register to vote. Right now, there are only 4 states in America that have that law: Kansas, Arizona, Georgia, and Alabama. Every state in the union should require proof of citizenship when you register to vote. Well, as you can probably guess, as soon as we passed the law, the ACLU sued, took us to court, and that case is still in court. That case, I stepped down as Secretary of State of Kansas in January. The case is still on trial. It's in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. We're waiting for a decision. But the ACLU argued ridiculously that federal law prohibits requiring proof of citizenship. It does not. But as part of the process, just in Kansas, we collected evidence for the court. And it's very difficult to tell if someone is on the voter. You can see, any of you, I assume you're all on the voter roll somewhere. We can look at your name, but I have no way of knowing whether you are a U.S. citizen by looking at your name. I have to have some external evidence. I have to have some indication that this person is actually not a U.S. citizen. There's nothing on the voter rolls that shows that. Well, in Kansas, we did have external evidence, and I won't go into how we got it, but we managed to find 127 non-citizens on our voter rolls, and that was just the tip of the iceberg, because we could only find this external evidence through bizarre means, like someone says that they decline jury duty, and they say on the juror form, "I'm not a U.S. citizen." We then took those declining jury forms and we ran those against the voter rolls, and we found some of them that way. So you have to use creative ways like that to find out who the non-citizens are on your voter rolls. Well, we found 127, but we had an expert witness come in. And the expert witness looked statistically at it and said the true number of illegal aliens on Kansas voter rolls could be as high as 30,000. That's enough to swing lots of big elections. And Kansas is a small state. In a state like California, the number of aliens on the voter rolls is easily in the over a million category, in the hundreds of thousands, if not over a million. It is a huge number, and the commission was on the verge of doing some groundbreaking research to try to put a number, to identify what that number is. But of course, the left shut it down before we could get there. And this is so important to them. This is the long game they are playing, because at the end of the day, it's about illegal aliens, legal aliens, and votes. Because the hope is that you will have legal aliens quickly become citizens, and the overwhelming majority from just about every part of the world will vote Democrat. And illegal aliens will get an amnesty, they will become legal aliens, and then they will vote. This is not my theory. Barney Frank, our friend on the left, who was, you remember him, the former congressman from Massachusetts, he said this in a speech in 2006. He said, this is the reason we Democrats need to be for amnesty, because we need to get these people on the voter rolls so they can vote Democrat and we can have a permanent majority in the U.S. House. He didn't say permanent majority, but he said something like that, governing majority, whatever he said. He said, we need them so that we can have a lasting majority in the U.S. House. That is exactly the game that's being played. And it's not just the Congress, it's also the White House. Let me just give you one thought before I leave, and this hopefully won't give you nightmares tonight. It gives me nightmares, and that is the day that Texas goes blue. Did you know that in the Robert Francis O'Rourke versus Ted Cruz Senate race, that Cruz only beat O'Rourke by 223,000 votes, or 2.6 percentage points? That's very close. If Texas goes, or let me give you another number. If we had an amnesty for 15 million illegal aliens, roughly 2 million, give or take, would be from Texas. Think of those, and they eventually would be registered voters. Think of those 2 million extra registered voters in a critical election that's decided by 200,000 votes. That's 10 times as many as they need. If that happens, there will never be another Republican president. There will never be another constitutionalist conservative appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Everything goes downhill. This is a game that Barney Frank and others, and now the whole Democrat Party seems to be on board. You hear them talking about it openly. This is the game they are playing, to transform the electoral landscape through the use of illegal immigration paired with an amnesty. So if you think this is an interesting issue but not an important issue, you are wrong. This is an extremely important issue. It is important to everything else that we hold dear, and that is why I am so grateful that Eagle Forum has maintained constant, and that Phyllis Schlafly was such a true leader, such a true patriot in the fight against illegal immigration. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a great pleasure.